I want to take a pause for a minute with this video on the normal content I produce on this channel and sort of summarize where I'm at in reality as a result of all the things that I've remote viewed. It seems every time I remote view something, it shatters another piece of me and forces me to find answers for things. Um, and truly, it's just a rabbit hole that keeps going. So I thought I'd create a video acting more or less as a personal journal for things that I've learned and assumptions that I'm now toying with regard to reality, in a few ideas. Idea one, on wisdom and power. Wisdom that is true is never heretical. It is necessary and spreads without force, coercion, destruction, or worship. Wisdom is not rule based, and it never punishes, and in fact holds space for debate. Wisdom is the long path and is meant for those who choose to seek. Power offers shortcuts and distraction and urges the user to take his gaze off the horizon and onto some reward or coveted thing. If the truth is a straight line through everything, power makes men orbit those things they desire without ever providing satisfaction. Truth offers satisfaction and fulfillment when shared or pondered upon. Truth expands us infinitely outward, whereas power contracts us while making us feel expansive. Truth offers the vast distance as long as that horizon is shared. Power doles out inches at a time and will cost you everything. Idea two, on religion, coercion, and the power of seeking or asking. Why was the Bible the first printed and widely distributed book on our planet? Why have there been so many miraculous births documented as having been foretold by quote unquote angels that often involve a star coming from the sky? And why have these miraculous births typically been to create beings that create so many rules for humanity? If you had access to a simpler civilization of beings, such as humans, that were like protozoa in comparison to your technological understanding, how would you interact with them? To answer this question, I suppose you'd first have to answer what type of being you or your culture of beings is like. Is your culture benevolent? If so, do you think that you may provide something to humans that benefited them in a benevolent way? Is it even possible? Perhaps there'd be limits to what you can offer them, as technology or concepts too efficient may actually allow one group to have power over another. Perhaps you'd limit your gifts to them to something simple, such as the concept of agriculture, farming, or just pure wisdom, let's say. This way, nothing you gave them could be sharpened and used to harm another. I suppose then this wisdom itself would never cause harm, as if it did this inherently, uh, as if it did, this inherently would have prevented you from sharing it, because you're benevolent. I would imagine you'd move among humanity, like an anthropologist may, how they move throughout another culture, simply observing, studying, but never changing the culture unless enough members of that culture agreed, of their own accord, to try something new. Then and only then would it be ethical and benevolent to intercede on their behalf. The moment a member of this tribe asks you your thoughts on things, that's where you can provide so much more. The anthropologist waits for a culture to knock. They never barge through the door and change it. Benevolent beings would be hard pressed to offer much to humanity because they'd only give what can never be weaponized or degraded ethically. Now, let's say you and your culture were sociopathic and viewed humans as merely a means to an end for yourself, and might provide any gift they sought or needed with no thought to the end use of it, other than making sure they could never free themselves from your grasp. You would never limit the interactions you had with them, so long as it never outed you and the power you attempt to hold over them. Without a conscience, you could shape and alter the very structure of everything these humans believed. The small-minded humans would take joy in knowing they had a plan to follow with a great reward at the end. They themselves don't know what you know, so you tell them to fear defying this book and its laws. Humans provide something fantastic for you, and the more they, quote unquote, spread forth and multiply, the greater possible spread of genetics for you to take from, to tinker with, and so on. Eventually, you, the highly intelligent sociopathic being, grow tired of the work it takes to corral these humans, so you devise a strategy that will allow them to police each other, providing them with a structured and unforgivingly rigid rule set to follow on pain of hell. The true believers would start going door to door in order to make sure the souls of their neighbors were saved and abiding by these rules. Anyone who thought differently is ostracized, murdered, and their culture taken and whitewashed, all in the name of truth, murdered in the name of love. You may realize over time that some positive messages must be sprinkled into the sermons so that the believers at least had something to look forward to. After all, you are a strategic sociopath who thinks in terms of benefit and reward yourself. So you teach us that when you die, if you live by the law and police others, you will be rewarded with a grand place where you too can reside. Ask yourself, why have so many artists painted events in which flying saucers and beams of light are in the background when biblical figures appear? Moreover, why have many of these figures been miraculously conceived without the typical coming together of two humans to make a baby? It's a very long list of these occurrences to families with much influence and power. For example, the Yellow Emperor, who was supposedly conceived when his mother was aroused by a lightning bolt from the Big Dipper while out for a walk. Or Ki, spelled Qi, or Hoji, known as being the god of agriculture, was said to have been conceived when his mother stepped in the footprint of a god. Laozi, Laozi, whose mother became pregnant while gazing at a falling star. I'm not even going to be able to pronounce this. Abaoji, Abaoji, also known as Yi, spelled Yi, the emperor, Taizu of Lao Abaoji, was conceived when his mom dreamt that the sun fell from the sky into her bosom. Going back to biblical reference, we of course have Jesus, who was conceived by Mary alone, John the Baptist, who was born after a quote-unquote angel appeared telling him that his wife Elizabeth would give birth to a son, even though they are much too old to conceive. Second Temple Jewish works also describe the miraculous births of Melchizedek, Noah, and Moses, all who played a part in biblical story. I used to think Jesus was cool until I reflected on the fact that the J-Man himself gave his approval on the Old Testament and told humans that the God of old who punished humans was right in doing so, because rules are rules, and somehow God just keeps on creating things that it hates and punishes them for simply existing. So I ask you to ask yourself, why would a God create something it hates? And if a being is truly benevolent, how could it ever impart wisdom that lead to wars in its name? Logically speaking, the only NHIs that would risk imparting knowledge to humanity are those who don't care about the consequence of their actions. Like spirituality, wisdom does not confine the student. On the contrary, it props them up so as to then ponder and potentially be receptive to greater and greater mysteries and concepts. It's like a path moving inward that causes the walker to expand also by doing so. It's a path where everything is always provided for the walker, and much faster if they demonstrate trust, love, patience, and a passion for growth. Wisdom provides an internal platform to question and debate, not to restrict or punish for being curious or even defiant. If wisdom is an engine, then its fuel is love. Upon really connecting with true wisdom, you feel it. It's an expansiveness, just like love. Wisdom spreads freely and is for the benefit of all. You're free to question it, debate it, ignore it, or disagree with it. Wisdom is like water, in that it constantly seeks out the next place to naturally flow to with ease. So I ask you this. If wisdom is like water, what is religion like? And in your own life, do you need to fight for what you want, or can you love for it instead? If I were a sociopathic NHI, I'd sprinkle in some good lessons and make a point to paint my influence as close to the true sources of benevolence, such that to the casual human observer, one would not be able to tell the difference between good and bad. I'd look like an angel if in fact that's what the one true God sent as its messengers. Assuming I got something out of overseeing humans, I'd maximize this system, unbeknownst to them, and keep them coming back over and over and over again. The best part for me as a sociopathic NHI is that they do it of their own free will because they believe what I told them, and if their intention is to follow my rule, and if they feel it in their hearts, I keep them forever and ever. Amen. Idea 3 on soul traps. Because the nature of this universe is to allow any being to express itself as it believes is best, it is also allowable that any being may tell another what the quote-unquote truth is, and another being may believe it and be bound to it until their mind changes. My view on reality seems to shatter every time I remote view lately. When I remote viewed Felicity City and accidentally bumped into the thought form or god Apollo, it was then that I realized reality is most likely an infinite set of other realities nested within each other. It was this ease of jumping from our reality into the reality that simulates this one, and then into Apollo's beyond that, that taught me something I want all of you to know. I feel that we are dreaming this from another place, and whether this is against our will or not, no longer matters to me, because when I die, I'll not be going into the light. I'll not, quote unquote, go back because some seemingly benevolent being tells me I have more work to do. When I pass away, I will emerge back into the higher version of myself that has been puppeting this meat suit all along. And if I must go back, it will be to help others. How will I know what to trust? How can you know what to trust? I will feel my way along and know what is right for me using intention and wisdom, not religion, not rules set by any other being, but the one true source of all that is. Because here's the thing. Nothing that is good will pull you into it. It may call to you, but will have nothing to hide and will never punish you or force you in any way. When I accidentally popped into the reality that emits ours in the Felicity City session, the beings there told me, quote, "You'll have a hard time leaving." But I didn't have a hard time leaving. It was as simple as setting my intention to bypass that belief, and I left that reality in an instant. Idea 4. I've stopped judging and idolizing others, including myself. Now, I recently emailed a major player in the RV community with information and data I felt may help something that they're working on. This person was the very first person I ever saw doing this stuff, and all this time I held in my heart a reverence and respect for them. I was ignored by them, and while they may have just been busy, this taught me something much more important than how I used to look at them. Never idolize or look up to another. No being exists that isn't by default equal to every other being. After watching Thomas Campbell's short film on YouTube titled "It is a Virtual Reality," which is linked below, you might have a better start to follow along with this concept, namely that there are no heroes, no villains, no reward worth striving for while existing. It doesn't matter who you are, only the choices that you make. And while our choices ring into eternity as a permanent retrospective of who each of us has chosen to be, whether that's heroes and villains, they don't exist over enough time. While our choices ring out into eternity as a permanent retrospective of who each of us has chosen to be, heroes and villains don't exist because over enough time all beings return to God, and every choice they made simply fueled the novelty of the universe. By simply existing, every being provides new possibility by their quote-unquote good or evil choices, which creates the possibility for new things. So, more importantly than good and evil, is the unstoppable momentum of the universe, moving outward and expanding forward at all costs. Reality, this universe, is comprised of all the beings that exist within it. The universe is a function, and the beings are variables in the ever self-adjusting equation. Each being's choice made is a vote that the universe tallies and weighs against another being's vote. I believe that if enough votes for the destruction of a planet, they'll get it. Just look at us. Likewise, if enough beings were to vote for the destruction of the universe itself where they exist, I think it would be somehow allowable. In this universe, love seems to be given the highest priority, and of this, the freedom for each being to choose what it would have the universe do is provided. So why does the concept of suffering exist at all, and is the entire universe bound to this give and take function of existing? I feel that suffering provides a stickiness that clings to the decisions all beings may make. Even beings like you or I, who've had it proven time and again that there is more to this reality, still abide by the general rules of this universe, because to each of us we know what pain is, and there's a value in this knowing. We choose to either increase or decrease this pain in ourselves and or others. So beings like us who know there's more still play the game, even when we know it's just a game. However, is suffering the only cause for growth? I argue that love, once felt, provides a far stronger internal desire to grow than pain. Ask yourself, what moments in your own life where another showed you mercy, compassion, or patience Model the most who you are watching this today. If love can model growth, it may be a fair assumption that only so much suffering is necessary. And if that's true, there must be a way forward to live together as one in the attainment of that. And going back to the good versus evil thing, if we think of the universe as a large brain and each individual being as a neural synapse, you wouldn't judge the synapse for having a dark, intrusive thought. Likewise, the universe doesn't judge beings for their action. It only asks that they act. All that's important to the brain is the thinking involved for the larger picture, which is to keep growing, becoming more dynamic, and finding novelty, at least in this universe. In this way, anything that interacts with anything else is inherently providing a positive net action to the universe, as it now has something new to reflect upon and now compare to all other things. The universe is a mathematical function whose very definition seems to cease existing if it cannot continually provide new variables to define itself against. All I know is that after thinking in this manner, I'm inclined to call it wisdom, because it has freed me of judging others and allowed me to loosen the reins on my own ego, because I now know that my soul is not a judgeable thing. It's neither good nor bad. It simply is and always has been. And again, all of this could be completely wrong. What do you think? Feel free to comment below, or don't. I guess the choice is yours.